All right, time for another lore update to the Khuresh lore from the Brood of the Naga Queens fan project. Now, just like I did my last one, I'm going to be covering two units. One of the units that was announced or talked about last 2 weeks or 2 weeks ago was the Biowak Hunting Pack, and then today we will also be talking about the Khureshi Fang Thrall. So you've probably already read the Biowak Hunting Pack, but we're going to go through the lore for each one of these. Then I'm going to talk about how they could possibly be brought into Total War Warhammer. As always, guys, please make sure you take a look at the actual website on their World Anvil, their Reddit posts. These guys deserve all of your acclaim, all of the credit. They have made the art, they have made the lore. Just so much painstaking stuff has gone into this, so I couldn't be happier to cover it and kind of give as much exposure as possible. But again, make sure that you are giving the praise to the authors and to the illustrators because they have made some great work. Let's jump into some fun lore here today, starting off with the Biowak Hunting Pack. The Biowak, or Grave Monitor, is a highly voracious amphibious predator found exclusively in Khuresh and the southeastern islands of the world. It is a large, cold-blooded lizard-like quadruped with 2 pairs of eyes, 4 powerful limbs, and a robust tail that allows it to propel itself quickly underwater. Created from the same stock as salamanders and razordons in ages past, it is believed that the Biowak was made by the Naga to be a more aggressive successor. If this is the case, their vile experiments have borne great fruit. Its corrosive venom-covered serrated teeth and hook claws allow the Biowak to rend thick hide and even steel armor with ease. Jet black armored scales covered in quills and spines of the Biowak stalk prey through the night and jungle gloom. Hideous rib-like bony protrusions jut from its underside. These rib teeth can be manipulated by the Monitor and assist in grappling attacks. The creature's tail is composed of thick corded muscle that can whip around to knock an unwary opponent off balance, allowing the Biowak to close in for a killing blow as it bears down with its bulk and crunches down with its underside rib teeth. Biowaks are known to be cannibalistic and highly opportunistic, frequently preying on smaller, weaker, or injured members of their species when the opportunity presents itself. They are also known to pry open tombs and dig up the graves of local Khureshi humans. Many running battles have been fought between these reptiles and the local tribes over such intrusions. Like the salamander, the Biowak possesses the ability to spit gouts of glowing, corrosive liquid. While not as volatile and flammable, the liquid is longer lasting, far more concentrated, and can cause paralysis in larger prey. The corrosive liquid is created by specialized glands on the creature's neck, which give the Biowak its gruesomely bloated throat sac. The Biowak can spit jets of this caustic liquid to blind, immobilize, and pre-digest its target at a distance, melting flesh, bone, and metal with sickening effectiveness. The sickly green-tinged venomous liquid also courses under the entirety of the Biowak's skin, leaking out of large pores or pustules pockmarking the length of its body when sufficiently agitated. These features, combined with the macabre, jutting rib teeth and tendency to rob tombs, give the Grave Monitor its moniker, as witnesses have mistakenly believed it to be an undead monstrosity halfway through decomposition. Local myths claim that this creature has such an obsession with the hunt that it perpetually drools blood. This is a slight misconception because although it does drool blood, it is not caused by insatiability, but due to the acid glands leaking and burning through the parts of the gum line, which rapidly regenerate just enough to maintain function, but not enough to prevent pain. While the Blood Naga could have fixed such a problem, the suffering that this defect caused heightened the Biowak's aggression beyond that exhibited by its component predecessors. In combat, the Biowak fully unleashes its pent-up rage, momentarily forgetting its unending pain as it scalds, brawls, and tears at the foe. It will eagerly hunt trolls, giant squigs, basilisks, and gigantic spiders, and will even gather to attack larger war beasts such as Hydra or Makor, as well as trespassing beastmen war herds. Biowak hunting packs are often gathered together for war by Pannaga handlers and deployed as fast-moving screening forces, intercepting heavy cavalry and weakening large, opposing monsters and constructs. Some are kept by the Blood Naga as guardian pets for their keen senses. The Biowak's stomach acid is incredibly corrosive, allowing them to safely digest putrid carcasses infected with a variety of toxins, parasites, and bacteria that would otherwise be lethal to other scavengers. Biowaks are thus used to clean up battlefields in Khuresh to prevent plague from uncontrollably spreading across the hinterlands, though the snakemen offer no such ministrations in the lands of their enemies. Due to the hostile nature of the hinterlands, the profusion of deadly monsters, and their own truculent temperament, most Biowaks tended to not live to full maturity. Those exceptional few that do, however, are called the Varun Hyra, the end stage of the Naga's experiments on this species. Toughened from centuries of survival, the ancient Hyra develops faster regenerative capabilities and grows larger than all others of its kind. Its most distinguishable features are the patagial membranes and air sacs growing across the sides of its torso, between the front limbs and hind limbs. Through prolonged exposure to the warpstone-saturated environment of Khuresh, Biowak's rib teeth mutated to accommodate the wide membranes and air sacs, allowing the Hyra to glide in the air over great distances. By climbing up and leaping off elevated terrain such as the branches of the hinterland's great trees, the Hyra can swoop onto unsuspecting targets from above, crushing and ripping chunks out of the unfortunates as the reptile abomination lands on them. As the Biowak matures into the Varun Hyra, its acid becomes slower acting, rendering it less efficient at corroding metal or bone with its spit. However, mutation in its innards have bestowed the Hyra with the ability to violently expel large concussive pellets of half-digested hair, horn, minerals, teeth, and bones that become volatile as they mix with the caustic spit at its throat. These distinguishing projectiles explode on contact with hard surfaces and spray shards of bone and teeth in all directions, maiming those unlucky enough to be caught in the blast with shrapnel and drenching their wounds in searing venomous mucus. This vomit attack only naturally occurs when the Hyra is confronted by a strong enemy and can only be artificially induced by Naga or Pannaga handlers in battle, provided the Hyra has been fed with the corpses of other fallen foes beforehand. In 2417 IC, a raiding party of Skaven from Clan Moulder traveled to Khuresh, looking for exotic specimens to create new monsters. It was the Biowaks that first caught their scent as they flicked their forked tongues to scent their quarry. The Skaven hunting parties found themselves harassed and picked off by the lurking creatures. Rat ogres were reduced to agonized lumps of meat and metal by acid. Eventually, the packmasters came upon what they thought would be their prize, the Varun Hyra. Instead, the creature and its pack had found their own prize, a meal that ran to them. Not a single Skaven of that expedition escaped Khuresh, the Biowaks hunting them all down before they could reach the safety of their tunnels. So with the Biowak Hunting Pack, we get something that is very similar to the Salamander Hunting Pack from the Lizardmen. And I think it differentiates itself a little bit in being disgusting for one, but having an emphasis more on explosive poison attacks and less so much on fire attacks. And I think that that's really cool. It has a corrosive element to it. So I think that having this unit have that corrosive element in that it either sunders armor or maybe the actual sight of watching these things melt units, everything can actually cause a leadership debilitating effect. I think that these things could play very similar, almost exactly similar to the Salamander Hunting Pack, but maybe give them a shorter range with more melee attack and more melee strength, or I'm sorry, weapon strength, to kind of symbolize that these things are a little bit more of a actual melee character, or I'm sorry, melee unit, and intended to actually scrap with things a little bit better than the Salamander Hunting Pack. Give them that little bit of differentiation so it's not just simply a carbon copy. And I think that an ability where they are cannibalistic, so it could be really cool if you had an activatable ability for a unit of Biowak Hunting Pack to eat another one if it's below a certain threshold, right? They say that they prey on the portions of the species that are weak, injured, so on and so forth. So if below 25% health, you can eat another hunting pack and regenerate health for the one that ate it. I think that would be a lot of fun and a really, really kind of cool way to, again, differentiate themselves from the generic Salamander Hunting Pack. Give them AP attacks. I don't want to say anti-large that might be a little bit too much, but give them AP attacks, have them have a poison missile attack that also centers armor, so they have a lot of punching power when they jump into combat. Give them a higher melee attack and weapon strength than your Salamander, maybe even a little bit higher of a charge bonus. Now, as far as the Regiment of Renown with the Varen, we get something that is a little more devastating. And I think a very similar profile would make a lot of sense. Maybe give them a smaller unit or maybe a higher armor to just kind of necessitate the fact that they are veterans that have that they've kind of risen to maturity. You could even say that the Regiment of Renown is a single entity, but that really wouldn't make sense. You know, the Ancient Salamander is its own unit. And when I was originally reading the lore, I thought that the Varen would be a single entity, much like the Ancient Salamander is. But looking at the illustration, it is a Regiment of Renown. So if the intention is to keep it as a Regiment of Renown, have a very similar profile to the actual Biowak Hunting Pack, the Grave Monitors, and change it so that it gets an activatable breath attack to just shoot in front of itself to do a ton of short range poison damage that has a good AP value. I think that'd be a really cool and very fun way. And we get this with a lot of other Regiment of Renown units, right? Like we take a look at Hydras, they get their really cool frost breath attack, so on and so forth. But if it was actually a single entity, you could have a lot of those same mechanics I just mentioned, right? With the breath attack, but have it maybe be a bigger breath attack, or I'm sorry, as far as its cone go, maybe have it go a little bit further since it is just a single entity versus a whole pack of things spitting corrosive liquids everywhere. But I think this is a really fun, highly characteristic unit from something that is or does derive its roots from lizardmen. And I think that's what makes this roster so fun to explore, is looking at these crossover points between, hey, this is very similar to the lizardman roster. These are things that the lizardmen have, and it makes sense because the old ones created the naga as well, the snakemen as well. But I think when we jump into our next unit, we'll start to see some other flavor coming into this roster from some different angles. So let's jump over now to the Khureshi Fang Thralls. The hardy local humans of Khuresh live a life of ceaseless adversity, existing under the fickle mercies of the Blood Naga. The hinterlands elements, diseases, wild monsters, incarnating demons, and random chaos phenomena ensure that most warm-blooded beings typically live short lives. The first encounters between serpents and men during the latter's early migrations were highly unpleasant, as the Naga and Snake Men resented every younger race that followed their own creation by the old ones. They considered primitive men particularly as teeming usurpers, as these bipedal creatures were one of the last intelligent beings to become civilized. The only initial value that the Naga saw in mankind was that they comprised the most numerous of potential prey. As millennia passed, the serpents had come to understand the true worth of humanity, as these bipeds were confronted with trial after trial across the world, rising to become the dominant sapient race in the present day after the empires of the elves and dwarfs had entered their respective decline. Mankind was resourceful and adaptable to hardship. Everywhere they were found, humans desired to understand and influence the environment around them, explaining phenomena through folklore and religion. Innate curiosity led to their development of advanced tools and skills independent of the elder races, which were then culturally passed down through successive generations. Even in Khuresh, humanity had managed to eke out an existence in defiance of their plight by hunting the monsters that endangered them, herding what beasts they could tame, crafting their own armor and weapons, and building the terraced paddy farms on which habitable land they could lay claim to. Humans were highly susceptible to the influences of chaos, yet many were also compelled by some inner strength to struggle against the dominion of the ruinous powers. These qualities marked the race as simultaneously the most numerous opponents and servants of chaos. The Serpent Naga noted all of this and came to the conclusion that mankind were to be the perfect livestock and test subjects for their purposes. Their capacity of self-expression, exchange of ideas, and organization on a mass scale also made them ideal fighting and labor thralls when properly indoctrinated. During the Great Chaos incursions, the Naga and Snakemen sheltered the better part of their people, fabricating a mythology of mercurial but ultimately benevolent Ophidian god protectors who protected them in the darkest days. Nomadic hunter-gatherers, fishers, or settled subsistence farmers, it mattered not to the Naga who came to weave legends that influenced the lives of the ancient Khureshi humans. Unbeknownst to most of the Khureshi, the Naga kept and still keep the habitable areas of the hinterlands fertile and unpopulated through primal Girin magic, not out of any sense of benevolence, but to ensure the stable supply of easily accessible prey and test subjects. More villages and human settlements than one would expect thus exist throughout the vast nightmarish expanse of Khuresh, and all are subjected to periodic hunts and raids on a measured scale. For the most part, however, the Serpent Naga afford the local humans the illusion of autonomy. The Blood Naga's fearsome reputations also tend to keep most humans of other nations away from the Jungle Peninsula. The men of Khuresh have very scant contact with the outside world. These factors result in most Khureshi never seriously considering leaving their benighted homes. During times when the storms of magic blow strong, large numbers of refugees will sometimes depart from the hinterlands under the auspices of one of the ruling Blood Naga queens, and then only for their own nefarious intent and long-prepared schemes. The majority of human elders and shamans present within the human communities are direct or indirect collaborators of the Blood Naga, kept alive to instill lessons into their clans and villages that benefit the snake men and ensure obedience through fearful reverence. Open hunts by the snake men are rationalized away as deific retribution upon the transgressions of some convoluted taboo or a seasonal force of nature that cannot be prevented. In the very rare event that an entire community rises in rebellion, the Blood Nagas simply withdraw their protection of the humans from the wilder denizens of the jungles and allow the local beastmen or monsters to run rampant within the settlements for a week or two. Cults have sprung up among the human communities that foster a culture of worship and appeasement of the Coiling Ones in an attempt to dissuade the serpents from devouring them. Hallowed pits filled with snakes or other slithering creatures are dug in many settlements, and votive offerings are placed on stone altars in reverence. Mythologies have been invented claiming that humans are allowed to join the serpents in a warrior afterlife, provided they reliably contribute a tithe of flesh to the snake men's cause in the material world. The humans in such settlements train ceaselessly in combat to prepare for such an event and imbibe snake poison from a myriad of local species to bolster their constitutions. The Blood Naga are only happy to exploit this misguided belief and draw mobs of able warriors from these settlements, who the snake men refer to as Fang Thralls, when it is time for the Marga to engage in open warfare. These remarkably resilient and motivated fighting men contribute to the snake men armies with their numbers and tenacity, tasked with tying down the infantry of opposing forces. The Fang Thralls wield weapons modified from agricultural or hunting implements, sickles, choppers, polearms, and wooden shields. Their hard lives inure them to pain and grant them a desperate, wiry strength. Exposed as they are to the hinterland's warpstone suffused atmosphere, deformities and disfigurements are common among the Khureshi humans, where they are viewed as blessings as much as curses. Most display protruding spikes, scales, and bony growths that prove useful in battle. Some among them are given the honor of equipping poison weapons by Pannaga leaders. When the battle is done, the Naga harvest the remains of the fallen Fang Thralls for the flesh larders and temple laboratories, their souls consigned to the present Naga or Pannaga leaders. Most survivors are brought before the Blood Naga and inculcated with enchantments to become the next generation of elders, though a wily few see the snake men and Naga for what they truly are, and escape into the mayhem to instigate rebellions in secret. The human inhabitants of Khuresh use the spear blowgun to hunt game to protect themselves against predators at range. Tipped with a poison derived from the pulp of a carnivorous orchid found in the hinterland's blood forests, such blowgun darts can effectively subdue some of the larger monsters of the peninsula, though only when deployed in large numbers. The spear tips affixed to the front of the blowguns allow these tough men to fend off enemies that manage to close the distance or to finish off downed foes. When deployed in profusion, the poison of these blowgun darts can even debilitate a Sarpa warrior should they manage to pierce through its hardened scales. This is why the Blood Naga keep Khureshi human tribes skilled in their use under more scrutiny than most, keeping their populations in check and actively encouraging cult worship to maintain compliance, though a small number of rebellious tribes still exist in secret. In battle, human blowgun users are deployed among the Fang Thralls, utilizing their training and skills in jungle combat to act as readily available, numerous, and expendable skirmishers under the watchful eyes of venom-spitting Naja leaders. So quite a bit of lore behind these, and I think it's a really cool amount of lore. It really drums up how humans exist in the hinterlands of Khuresh without being too heavy-handed. It creates this lore of mythology behind the snake men and the naga for the humans of this land. Also, a little bit of kind of like a closed door policy, right? These things are very insular. The Khureshi Fang, or the Khureshi humans are removed from the other portions of the world, and when they do interact with those portions of the world via, beastmen or chaos, it is seen as an ill omen, or that this is because we didn't worship hard enough. So it's really cool how the authors have made the naga and the snakemen really pulling the strings of Khuresh, or the Khureshi humans, and it makes for a really, really cool, fun, flavorful lore here. But we get 2 different variations, sword and board and polearm for the melee versions, and then for our range version, we get a blowgun. So we get almost what we have with the lizardmen and their access to blowguns, but with the sword and board and the polearm, we get something that is very similar to human rosters as far as their typical kind of peasant or Bretonnian peasants and Empire State troops, what have you. But with what this has been described as, I would look at these units more along the lines of peasant men-at-arms and less along the lines of Empire State troops. These are not elite fighting forces. These are agricultural workers. Take a look at the little portion of the lore here that talks about how they're using implements that were meant for agriculture, right? Like scythes and so on and so forth. So I think pulling from that, right? The nomadic hunter-gatherers, the fishers, or settled subsistence farmers, these individuals are what's making up the Khureshi Fang Thralls. And I really like that this is going to be something that if it was brought into Total War, they would have the expendable trait slapped onto them. They would have very low armor, probably very low melee defense, but probably to make up for it, they would probably have some sort of physical resistance, so to resemble that tenacity. And they would have, I would assume, some form of benefit, either melee attack or weapon strength, to, again, make up for the fact that these things are going to be like paper. And I don't think they're going to be massively strong if they were to be brought in, right? Like, you're not going to look at, oh, okay, they're expendable, so I want these things to topple a hard target. They're not going to do that. They're just there to tie things up for you, while you would use your bigger, scarier naga or snakemen units to get around for flanking attacks, to just screen out big charges, so on and so forth. And I think this is cool for the roster, and it's something that, while we don't know how the Chaos Dwarfs are going to be brought into Total War Warhammer 3, it's something I would expect from a Chaos Dwarf roster too. Chaos Dwarfs have a lot of mentions of slavery across, well, not necessarily slavery, but yeah, no, for Chaos Dwarfs it's slavery. Let's not cut any corners here. Across like hobgoblins and other greenskins and skaven, they're just used to fodder, to throw against the enemy to protect the other more important Chaos Dwarf units. So we might get similar mechanics here with the Chaos Dwarfs that then Creative Assembly could look at. Well, we have a lot of the existing model work in Lizardmen. We have a lot of the existing mechanical work now from the Chaos Dwarfs. We slap these 2 elements together and we get a lot of the base principles of what the authors have created here in how the lore interacts with Khuresh and the Khureshi humans that they, the Naga and Snakemen and the Khureshi humans, and how they kind of induct them into their military and use them opportunistically, which I think is really cool. Now, for the blowgun portion of it too, it's a spear blowgun, so maybe that thing has some very light AP damage. Maybe not even the actual icon that says, hey, there's just AP damage, but having a little bit more AP, like 4 or 5, so that these things can do a ton of AP damage, because you're shooting a spear. Well, not necessarily a spear, it's just called a spear blowgun. It's just a larger than, it's not a dart, is a better way to put it. It's just not a dart. And also having poison damage is a pretty hefty little bit of range damage coming out from these thralls. So I really am excited to see how they develop this further, because they've told me that another thing that they want to add into this roster, I don't want to show you any pictures, it's on them to do that, is a artillery piece that will have a mechanic that if the artillery piece does damage to the Khureshi Thralls, while it is also doing damage to the opponent, because its attack would just be irregardless of irregardless, that's not a word. The attack would be regardless of anyone in front of it. If it hits the Khureshi Thralls, it would turn them essentially into light infantry berserkers, and I don't want to ruin how that works. So when we jump into that unit in the future, we could see how that artillery piece could play very well into Khuresh's military, much in the same way, or I say artillery piece, but I guess war engine might be a better word, much in the same way that a lot of other factions have mechanics like that. We're going to be seeing it with Total War Warhammer 3 and Khorne. We see it with the undead, especially when it comes to the vampire counts and their mortis engines. Having this reliance on some sort of war engine that also buffs or bolsters or heals your army and debuffs or hurts the opposing army has become pretty big, especially when we take a look at anything that uses expendable infantry, or at least some sort of infantry that can be manipulated in some way, shape, or form by that war engine. Again, another example being the Skaven rosters or in the Dark Elves. So I think this is a really cool lineup for other things that we're going to talk about in the future with this Khuresh lore. But that concludes our little lore update here for Khuresh today, guys. Hopefully you got a lot of really cool information here, some other new fun things to explore in the lore. As always, a huge shout out to the Khuresh team in sharing this information ahead of time with me to share with you guys. It's been really fun reading through the lore of this and kind of talking with them about some of the future stuff they have planned and how it intersects with what they've already created and showed off to you guys. An example would have been what we just talked about, right? So plenty more of this coming. Like I said, I'll be doing them I think it's pretty much every month, like every set of weeks. I'll be doing 2 of the units just as they release them, and I'll do it on that second one. So we'll see some of the new stuff coming as they release it out to you. And please, by all means, leave feedback for them in the comment section. I know they will check it out. And please make sure you're checking out their World Anvil, their Reddit, as much support as possible to these bros. They're doing so much awesome work, and I really want to make sure they get a lot of eyes on it. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, all that fun action. But have a good one, and take care.